So, imagine a man standing at the edge of this raging, muddy river.
Okay.
His eyes are squeezed tightly shut, like almost in pain. And he's whirling this dirty, blunt gardening shovel over his head.
Wait, a shovel?
Yeah, a literal blunt spade. And with a massive, desperate heave, he just flings it far out into the water.
Right.
And as it splashes out of sight, he throws his arms up and screams, "I have conquered!" Like he just, single-handedly defeated an entire empire.
It is such a bizarre, specific image. But honestly, it perfectly captures the absolute absurdity of human psychology.
It really does.
Because, I mean, we always assume the ancients were operating on some totally different elevated frequency, right? Like they're all just sitting cross-legged under trees and dispensing gentle platitudes. But texts like the Jataka Tales just completely shatter that illusion.
Oh, they shatter it entirely. Because, for those who don't know, the Jataka Tales are these ancient Buddhist texts that chronicle the past lives of the Buddha. But when you actually read them, the psychological landscape is startlingly modern.
Yeah, it really is.
It reads like a dark comedy. And, our mission with this deep dive isn't to just recount old religious fables to you. We want to extract the psychological insights buried within them.
Exactly.
We want to explore how these ancient stories diagnose the exact same blind spots, follies, and struggles with human nature that you and I deal with today.
Because the human operating system really hasn't received a hardware update in a few thousand years.
Nope.
The cultural context changes, sure, but the bugs in our programming are identical. I mean, we still cling to meaningless things. We still destroy our own lives trying to fix minor problems, and we definitely still struggle with the void of endless consumption.
Absolutely. And to give you an idea of the scenarios we are looking at today, we have a carpenter who gets his skull cleaved in two over a mosquito.
Which is wild.
Totally wild. Plus, that guy I mentioned clinging to a literal blunt spade as if it were a sprawling kingdom, and a man swallowed whole by the earth out of sheer, terrifying ungratefulness.
It's quite the lineup.
It is. So let's start with the first thing here, which is misguided effort. There is a story in the sources called the Makasa Jataka that perfectly captures what happens when the cure is, well, much worse than the disease. Can you walk us through what happens to this unfortunate carpenter?
Yeah, so the setup is darkly brilliant. The text describes a carpenter who is just working away, planing some wood, and the source specifically notes that he's a bald, gray-haired man.
Right, very specific.
Very. It says his bald head was glistening like a copper ball. So he is focused on his work, and this mosquito settles right on his scalp and stings him. His son is standing nearby, so the carpenter casually asks him to, get rid of the bug.
Just a completely normal, everyday annoyance.
A totally minor annoyance. But the son, wanting to be helpful, grabs the nearest tool to swat the mosquito. And unfortunately, the nearest tool happens to be a very sharp, very heavy axe.
Oh, man. I think anyone listening can see the horrific trajectory of this decision.
Yeah, you can see it coming a mile away. He takes a massive swing at the mosquito on his father's glistening head, and the text says he cleaves his father's skull in twain.
Wow.
Yeah, the father dies instantly. And the sources don't stop there. They give us a parallel tale, the Rohi Jataka, which hits the exact same psychological note.
Oh, right, the one with the maid.
Exactly. In this one, a maidservant named Rohi sees flies stinging her resting, aged mother. The mother asks for help, and Rohit cries out, "I'll kill them."
Famous last words.
Literally. She grabs a heavy pestle, which is this massive blunt tool used for pounding rice, takes a mighty swing to swat the flies, and just kills her mother outright.
I mean, the actions are so wildly disproportionate to the problem. It forces us to look at the underlying mechanism of how these characters are making decisions.
Right.
It's easy to laugh at the absurdity of it, but I couldn't help but relate this to modern situations. Like, we all encounter these fixers in our lives.
Oh, but
These are well-meaning people who will absolutely destroy a project or a dynamic just to solve a minor issue. It's like you mentioned a minor software bug to a developer, and instead of just patching it,
they decide to rewrite the entire code base over a weekend.
yes, and they end up crashing the whole system.
Well, the Jataka Tales are diagnosing a specific cognitive failure here, which psychologists might call cognitive tunneling.
Cognitive tunneling. Okay, explain that.
So when faced with an annoyance or a threat, the human brain has a tendency to hyper-focus on the immediate stimulus. The mosquito, the flies, the software bug.
Right.
Under stress, or even when just eager to please, the brain drops the broader contextual map entirely. Like the son's objective is purely tactical, kill the mosquito.
He entirely misses the strategic reality.
Exactly. The strategic reality being that the mosquito is sitting on a fragile human skull.
It is fascinating that the text explicitly spells out the moral for us here. It says, sense-lacking friends are worse than foes with sense.
That is such a profound line.
It really is. Because we tend to put a premium on loyalty and good intentions, right? We assume those are the most important qualities in our allies. But this argues the exact opposite.
Because a foe with sense calculates risk and reward. They operate within predictable boundaries. You can anticipate their move.
Right, you know where they stand.
But a fool with good intentions operates entirely without boundaries. The stories highlight that good intentions are a terrible metric for trust if they aren't paired with situational awareness.
Yeah.
Surrounding yourself with people who lack this broader context, no matter how intensely loyal they are, is a massive liability. They will inadvertently burn down your house just to get a spider out of the kitchen.
Which forces you to evaluate your own behavior, too. Like, are you reacting to the mosquitoes in your life with a fly swatter, or are you pulling out an axe? It requires a serious level of self-awareness to recognize when our desire to fix something is actually blinding us to the collateral damage we're about to cause.
And that transitions beautifully into the next major theme of these texts.
Yeah, let's get into that.
Because the first two stories explore the external collateral damage of our actions, right?
Yeah.
But the Jataka Tales take that same irrationality and turn it inward. We often assume that it takes something massive to trap us psychologically.
Like, we think a person's soul is bound by immense wealth or political power.
Exactly. Some grand, sweeping temptation. But the ancient texts argue that the trap isn't made of the object's value at all. It's made entirely of the mind's own grip.
Which brings us back to the man by the river, the Kuda la Jataka, or the story of the Spade sage.
Yes.
This is such a profound exploration of human attachment. So we have this gardener who is incredibly poor. He has absolutely nothing in the world except for a single blunt spade.
It's not even a high-quality tool.
No, it's basically garbage. But he decides he wants to pursue a higher spiritual path, to renounce the world and become a forest recluse.
And in the ancient context, becoming an ascetic meant completely severing ties with society to isolate yourself for spiritual meditation.
Right.
You leave all property, all status, all comforts behind. It is the ultimate test of non-attachment.
So he hides his blunt spade, goes to the forest, and begins his new life. But the text tells us that thoughts of that spade rise in his heart. The passion of greed overcomes him.
Over a shovel.
Right. So he abandons his vows, leaves the forest, hikes all the way back to the world just to retrieve this worthless, dirty shovel. And he does this 6 times.
6 times.
6 times he renounces the world, and 6 times he breaks his vows to reclaim a tool he doesn't even need anymore.
It is the ultimate picture of self-sabotage. But on the 7th attempt, something shifts. He finally realizes that this specific object is his absolute downfall. So he takes the spade, walks to the edge of a mighty rushing river, and he does something very specific.
Yeah, he closes his eyes tightly. He whirls the spade around his head 3 times, and he flings it as hard as he can into midstream.
And as it splashes into the water, he lets out this massive lion's roar of triumph, shouting, "I have conquered! I have conquered!"
And then the king of Benares happens to be riding by after a victorious military campaign.
Talk about timing.
Right. He hears this guy shouting, brings him over, and asks who he defeated. And the sage explains that 1,000 military victories are vain if you haven't conquered the lusts within yourself.
Which is such a powerful message.
It is. And the king is so struck by this realization of internal victory over external victory that he actually decides to renounce the world himself.
It is a profound conclusion, but I think it hinges entirely on the absurdity of the object.
See, I have to push back on the framing of the story here.
Okay, why?
Well, if you are an ancient philosopher trying to write a profound psychological fable about the dangers of greed, why base this epic realization on a terrible gardening tool? Why not make him obsessed with a chest of buried gold or a lavish palace? A blunt spade just feels almost comical.
But that comedy is the psychological genius of the text. By making it a worthless blunt spade, the story strips away all external, intrinsic value. If the story had used a chest of gold, you and I would read it and think, well, obviously he went back for it. It's a chest of gold.
That's life-changing money, yeah.
Exactly. We would attribute the pull to the object itself.
We would externalize the problem.
Precisely. By making the object objectively worthless, the text forces us to look entirely at the internal mechanism of attachment. The value of the object is totally irrelevant.
It's all about the grip.
Yes, it is the strength of the grip it has on the mind that matters. The spade represents known territory. His entire identity was built around being a gardener, and that spade was the physical anchor to that identity. To leave it in the dirt was to experience ego death.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. It's like the sunk cost fallacy mixed with the profound comfort of the familiar.
Right.
And honestly, we all have a blunt spade in our lives. Like, it might be a dead-end job that pays just enough to keep you comfortable but not enough to let you thrive. You hate it, but you know exactly how it works.
Or it might be a toxic friendship you've maintained for 10 years out of pure habit.
Exactly. Or even a mild addiction to, like, doom scrolling on your phone for 3 hours every night.
Oh, that's a big one.
Right. It's not grand. It's not glamorous. It's actually kind of pathetic when you look at it objectively. But your mind clings to it because it represents a predictable baseline.
And the mechanism of how he finally defeats this attachment is equally insightful.
Yeah.
Notice that on the 7th try, he doesn't just sit in the forest and try to use willpower to stop thinking about the spade.
Willpower is a finite psychological resource.
Exactly. It eventually depletes, which is why he failed the first 6 times.
So he alters his environment instead.
He fundamentally restructures his physical reality. He throws it in a rushing river where it cannot be retrieved, and crucially, he closes his eyes so he can't even see the trajectory.
That's the best part.
He blinds himself to location, so he isn't tempted to go diving for it later. He engineers a situation where relapse is physically impossible.
It just shows a profound understanding of human frailty. Like, you don't just decide to be better, you have to design your environment so that your worst impulses can't easily win. The feeling of conquest is greater than a king's military victory, because conquering an external enemy is a matter of force. Conquering your own internal attachment is a matter of rewriting your own behavioral architecture.
Well said. But, while the Spade sage eventually conquered his small attachment, the Jataka Tales also explore what happens when that dynamic is flipped.
What do you mean?
Well, what happens when human greed goes completely unchecked by empathy? We move from a story of comical, almost pathetic attachment to a story of profound, bottomless ingratitude.
Yes. If the Spade sage represents the danger of holding on to things, the Silavanaga Jataka, the story of the good king elephant, represents what happens when that desire turns into actively taking from others.
And this story is intense.
It is. The sources describe the Bodhisattva, the future Buddha, born as this magnificent elephant in the Himalayas. The descriptions are incredibly vivid. He is white all over like a massive silver. His eyes are like diamond balls, and his trunk is like silver flecked with red gold.
He's a creature of consummate beauty and pure goodness.
He is the literal embodiment of nobility and grace, but his goodness is immediately tested. One day, he is in the forest and hears a man weeping. It's a forester from Benares who has lost his way and is terrified he's going to die.
Right.
The elephant is moved with deep compassion. He rescues the man, brings him to his own dwelling, feeds him for several days, and then carries him on his back to the edge of the forest, pointing him toward the high road to safety.
But the man is an absolute ingrate. While riding on the back of his savior, he secretly memorizes all the landmarks on the way out.
He is already commodifying the creature that just saved his life.
Yes. He gets back to Benares, goes to the ivory workers' bazaar, and finds out that ivory from a living elephant is incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
So he buys a saw, packs provisions, and hikes all the way back to the elephant.
And the escalation of his demands is where the psychology gets truly dark.
It really does. He gives a sob story about how he's destitute and asks the elephant for just a piece of his tusks. And the elephant, being pure goodness, willingly bows down on his knees and lets this man saw off his 2 magnificent tusks.
It's a willing sacrifice driven by compassion.
But the man goes back, sells the tusks, spends all the money, and returns a second time.
Of course he does.
He asks for the rest of the ivory. Again, the elephant allows it. The man sells that, spends it, and comes back a third time. He tells the elephant he still can't make a living, and he demands the very stumps of the tusks, deep inside the skull.
Ugh. Here is where the imagery of the text becomes incredibly visceral and honestly horrifying.
Yeah, brace yourselves. The elephant lies down. This man physically climbs onto the elephant's face.
Oh, wow.
The text says he tramples upon the elephant's sacred, silver-like trunk. He viciously kicks at the roots of the tusks, kicking away the raw flesh to clear it so we can saw the stumps directly out of the elephant's head. And then he just takes the stumps and walks away.
The betrayal is sickening to read. But, the text doesn't let him get far, does it?
No, it doesn't. The sources say that the solid earth, the same earth that can support the mighty weight of massive mountains, cannot bear the burden of such wickedness.
The ground literally bursts asunder in a yawning chasm beneath the man's feet, and flames from nethermost hell wrap the ingrate in what the text calls a shroud of doom, just swallowing him whole.
The conclusion drawn by the tree fairy who witnesses this entire tragedy is the core insight here.
What does she say?
The fairy says, ingratitude lacks more the more it gets. Not all the world can glut its appetite. This is an ancient, incredibly precise framing of what modern psychologists call the hedonic treadmill.
Which is fascinating because the hedonic treadmill is usually applied to how we adapt to positive things, like getting a new car or a raise.
Right.
You feel a spike of happiness, but you quickly adapt, and that new state just becomes your baseline. You constantly need more to feel the same high. So how does this apply to ingratitude?
Well, what the Jataka text is illustrating is the hedonic treadmill of greed unchecked by gratitude. The psychological architecture of an ingrate is someone who views the world and other people purely as resources to be extracted.
Okay, I see.
But consuming without gratitude creates a void that can never be filled. Think about it. When you experience a genuine, reciprocal relationship, your brain releases serotonin and oxytocin chemicals associated with deep satisfaction and bonding.
But when you simply take,
You only get a quick dopamine hit of acquisition.
and dopamine always leaves you wanting more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The man didn't just want the ivory, he wanted the source of the ivory, down to the bloody roots. He was trying to fill an internal abyss with external objects. Because he lacked gratitude, which is the mechanism that allows us to feel enough, every piece of ivory he took just made the abyss wider and deeper.
It perfectly mirrors the inevitable collapse of certain relationships in our own lives. Like, you can probably feel of someone who is a perpetual taker.
Oh, we all know one.
They always have a crisis, they always need a favor, they always need emotional support, but they never offer anything in return. You give and you give, cutting off pieces of your own tusks trying to help them, but it's never enough. The demands just escalate.
And the earth bursting asunder isn't just a divine punishment in the story. It's a metaphor for structural failure.
Right.
You cannot build a life, a society, or a relationship on a foundation of pure extraction. At some point, the physical and emotional load-bearing walls give out. The ingrate is swallowed by the collapse of his own making because he has systematically destroyed the very thing that was sustaining him.
Wow. The texts leave us with incredibly stark warnings. We've seen the danger of cognitive tunneling, where axe-wielding mosquito hunters lack the strategic vision to see the consequences of their actions.
Yeah.
We've unpacked the psychological weight of a blunt spade and how the most seemingly worthless attachments can trap us because they represent the comfort of our known identity. And we've witnessed the structural collapse caused by a thankless heart where perpetual taking destroys the foundation of a life.
The value of these ancient texts is really holding them up as a mirror. As you listen to this deep dive, look at the landscape of your daily routine, your relationships, your habits. What is your blunt spade?
Yeah, what is it?
What is that one familiar, maybe even slightly toxic comfort that you keep returning to instead of moving forward? Have you tried to just use willpower, or are you willing to restructure your environment to throw it in the river?
And honestly, are you currently swinging an axe at a mosquito? Like, are you about to send a scorching email to fix a minor annoyance at work, completely dropping the broader context of your team's morale?
It requires brutal honesty to look at your own actions and ask if you are operating with the wisdom of the Spade sage on his final attempt or the blind foolishness of the carpenter's son.
I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over. We mentioned at the start that these Jataka stories are framed as past lives, cycles repeating over and over.
Right.
The Spade sage repeated his exact same mistake 6 times before he finally engineered his own success. Even if you don't believe in literal reincarnation, consider this from a purely psychological perspective. What if the mistakes you are making today are just patterns you've repeated for years without realizing it?
What if you were living your own past lives right now, within this one lifetime? Looping through the same bad relationships, the same self-sabotaging habits, the same ungrateful taking, simply because you haven't recognized the pattern yet.
Breaking the cycle, finally recognizing that blunt spade, closing your eyes tight, and throwing it in the river for good might be the only way to break that loop. It takes a moment of total commitment to shatter a pattern that has defined your identity.
It really does.
But it might be the only way to finally step up to the edge of the water and shout, "I have conquered!"
The ancient world didn't have easy answers, but they mapped the human mind with terrifying accuracy. Leave the axe in the shed, throw the spade in the river, and leave the tusks on the elephant.
Something to deeply consider today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.